今天是香港观察执行长官他叫罗杰斯他呢写了一本新书是关于揭露那个中共暴政30年他主要是调查香港问题的这么一个人权活动家。他今天这本新书呢是他的第一天的发行日，所以呢他举办了一个发布会，也类似于一个 party， 所以他也邀请了我，我就去了。但是呢，我刚才呢就是说大家看到那个湖面呢是海德公园，我因为早到了现在这个是 reception 也就是前台，我按时进去了，然后在这个门口呢，他放了很多签名的书我买了2本，那个就是罗杰斯远处的那个他正在接待客人我呢一会儿呢想去跟他合张影，向他表示祝贺，因为他特别忙嘛就是他。那么我近一段时间来呢，就跟他已经见过好几次面了然后这个俱乐部，这是英国皇家一个游艇俱乐部，它在海德公园旁边。这是俱乐部的外面这个玻璃门外面，里面呢，大家呢目前呢正在聊天，因为这个发布会呢还没有开始等一下才正式开始，所以大家呢都自己找人聊天。我呢几乎都不认识我就认识一个那个西藏办事处的那个主任，我认识，跟他打了招呼谈了几句。然后那个大纪元的那有一位这个女士她来了，我也认识，跟她打了招呼其他人呢我都不认识但是呢我也没什么话好说，我就拿着视频现场做视频。其实呢我忘了本来可以现场直播的，但是呢我在做这个视频的时候，我没想到我可以现场直播，我怕他们会有意见，所以我就把视频拍下来了。所以这是前半部分那么现在开始了那个主持这个发布会的是英国上议院的一个议员，叫 David 那个阿尔顿就是这位他是主持人。现在呢他在介绍这个罗杰斯这本书的内容，也在评论中国的现在的这个人权状况。他们主要是评论香港问题那个新疆问题、西藏问题罗杰斯这本书主要写的也是香港的人权状况然后那个维吾尔族就是新疆维吾尔族的然后就是西藏的顺带他们也提到台湾问题我总的感觉他们对中国大陆好像并不是太关心为什么呢我也不太清楚，也可能中国大陆不太好进入，所以他们掌握的这些资料呢，第一手资料比较少。他这本书呢，我呢粗粗的看了一下，一共有12章就是谈他在中国的这个经历。罗杰斯呢，他曾经在青岛教过中文他几乎他也可以说在中国大陆度过他的年轻的时候他以前跟我讲过很多故事，什么公安怎么追捕他那个他们怎么逃跑躲避很惊险这个呢是我们认识了以后有几次呢吃饭喝酒的时候呢他喜欢谈他在中国的经历，他本人也能说几句中文说的还不错至少他知道青岛啤酒那么后面呢我就不介绍了， 我这段视频呢是这个发布会的上半部分，等到下半部分我才想起来了我可以做直播，所以我就停止录像了，我就把直播打开了。所以在这个视频前面我又发了那个视频呢，实际上是直播我想后面我就不介绍了那大家去看吧我也不打字幕，太辛苦了，谢谢大家。但是后面呢有罗杰斯的演讲，他讲了时间比较长，大概有15、16分钟吧。大家如果再等一下，这个 David 的后面可能就是罗杰斯要讲话，他呢要介绍他的新书谢谢大家。
Well, we make a difference by raising our voices. We make a difference by putting pen to paper. We make a difference by speaking out, and not by holding back. And all of those things can always be said about Ben. He doesn't hold back. He works all the hours that God sends. He is a champion of a just cause. He stands with the tank man, with rich man, with God, with all of you who care about freedom, liberty, democracy, and the rule of law. That's what brings us together to celebrate the publication of the China Nexus. Ben, the floor is yours, and then the panel discussion.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, can I thank all of you so much for coming tonight. It's wonderful to see such a wonderful range of old friends, colleagues, representatives of the different communities that this book covers, and real allies in this cause. So I'm deeply grateful to you all. I want to say a special thank you to Lord Alton for not only hosting this event tonight and for writing the foreword to the book, but also for all your many tireless efforts. If you think I work long hours, you should look at Lord Alton's diary. All your efforts in the pursuit of human rights, not only for the peoples of China, but well beyond. I'd like to thank my colleagues in Hong Kong Watch, and also our friends in Free Tibet and Stop Uyghur Genocide, who are co-hosting this event tonight. And of course, especially thank my publishers, Optimum Publishing and Dean Baxendale and all his team, and he's already thanked his wonderful team, but I extend my deepest thanks to everybody who's helped get us to where we are tonight. And a special thank you to Dean, not only for taking me on and for publishing this book, but for being not just a publisher, but actually a fellow troublemaker and a real ally in this cause. There were so many other people that I could and should thank. I did for the book over 80 interviews, and rest assured I'm not going to name all 80 would be here all night, but I do want to thank everyone, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Tibetans, Chinese dissidents, Chinese Christians, Taiwanese, and China watchers and policymakers around the world. If I was to name one person, and there are many I should name, but I will just name one, and that is that I was hugely privileged, and it was actually Lord Alton's suggestion that got me to do this. I was able to do an interview in writing with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is included in the book, and that was a great honour. I want to thank Nathan Lord, who can't be with us tonight, but who's written the preface to the book. My friends and colleagues in CSW, the human rights organisation where I worked full-time for 17 years and with whom I still continue to work closely. And I want to say a special thank you to 3 people without whom this book would have taken much, much longer, or possibly not even seen the light of day. Max Darby, Tom Webster and John Stackhouse, who spent many hours transcribing those 80 interviews for me and providing valuable research. And finally, before I talk very briefly about the book itself, there's one other person I would like to thank, both for being here tonight and for all her support, and that is my mother. response, I think she must be far more feared in Beijing than I am, because her response, every time she received one of these anonymous letters sent from Hong Kong, telling her to tell her son to shut up, was simply to laugh and to tell me that she'd given up many years ago trying to tell me to shut up. This book started with a slightly crazy late night idea. I was feeling an itch to write another book, and China was the obvious topic because it's so much of my focus today. But equally, I thought initially that there are thousands of books on China. What value could I possibly add? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that although there are so many books on China, there are actually very, very few, indeed if really any, that put together in the way that this book has done the litany of human rights in one volume. A book that tells the story of the crackdown on dissidents, lawyers, bloggers, and civil society across China, together with the story of the dismantling of Hong Kong's freedoms and autonomy, the genocide of the Uyghurs, the atrocities in Tibet, the persecution of Christians in Falun Gong, forced organ harvesting, the threats to Taiwan, the complicity of the Chinese regime with crimes against humanity in Burma or Myanmar and in North Korea, and includes a chapter at the end on what the international community should do about all of this. So I sketched out an outline late one night, and I sent it to Dean because we knew each other, we collaborated on some conferences together, and I sent him this late night email, basically just asking whether he thought there was anything to this idea. And I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning to find a one-line reply from Dean, "I'll do it." One of the things that I was very clear about in my mind from the start was that I wanted the book not only to tell the story of the horrific repression by the Chinese Communist Party regime under Xi Jinping, but also at the same time to convey my love of China and all the diverse peoples who suffer under the CCP. I believe it is so important that we are clear about the difference between the CCP and China. I am not anti-China. On the contrary, I'm very pro-China as a country with its rich culture and civilization. It is the CCP that I oppose. And so the book begins with the most personal and in some ways most light-hearted. It gets heavier going as you get deeper into it. Chapter recounting my experiences living as an 18-year-old for 6 months in Qingdao, famous, by the way, for the best beer in China. That wasn't why I went there, but it was because I was there. And I have kept my diaries from my time in Qingdao, and also quite a lot of letters exchanged with Chinese friends, and notes and newspaper clippings, and also newspaper clippings from my 5 years living in Hong Kong, the first 5 years after the handover. And I kept all of these in boxes under my bed, and I was able to pull out those boxes and dig through my old diaries and notes and clippings, all of which provided an invaluable resource for the first 2 chapters. For the rest of the book, as I've already said, I did many interviews, I did a lot of background reading, my spare room was piled high with books and reports and clippings, and that's how I set about approaching this subject. Before I conclude, and I look forward very much to the panel discussion, I thought I would just read you 2 very short extracts to give you a flavour of the book. There are, of course, so many aspects of the book that I could have chosen extracts from, and it's always difficult because I don't want to leave out any one particular community or issue. But the 2 that I want to share with you, the first is the extract from the chapter on Tibet. And I share this partly because it conveys the human spirit that I think hopefully flows throughout the book in all the different chapters, but also because I am concerned today that as the Uyghur genocide increasingly and rightly, and I'm absolutely deeply committed to this, as it begins to get more and more attention, and it needs that attention, as Hong Kong over recent years has rightly gained more attention. There is a danger that Tibet falls off the headlines and the agenda, and I think it's in all our interests to keep Tibet on the agenda alongside the Uyghurs, alongside Hong Kong, alongside all the other issues. So I just share this brief extract from the chapter on Tibet, and it comes from talking to several Tibetans, starting with a young man called Wangden Kiab. Today's Tibet, Wangden Kiab said, is a prison in which your movements are monitored, your thoughts corrected, and your rights confiscated, snatched, and crushed. However, like all the Tibetans I spoke to, he holds on to hope. They cannot kill all the Tibetans. So as long as there is a single Tibetan on this earth, their spirit will remain for generations. One day, we can have our own country. Nima Lamo expressed a similar belief. Our hope, she said, is driven by the fact that the truth always prevails. Truth is on our side. That is why Tibetans are hopeful, because truth always wins. For her and most Tibetans, their two desires are to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama and to see Tibet free. We want to be able to live our own lives, she said, to live in freedom, to live with our heads held high. Lobsang Tsetsen, a young Tibetan who was translating for Lamo in our interview, added an additional aspiration. Born and raised in exile, he said he had no bigger desire than to be a citizen of a free Tibet, to walk on the streets of Tibet, and as a football fan, to watch the Tibetan national football team play in the World Cup. Admitting that might seem a far-fetched dream, nevertheless, he said, I want to sit in a stadium and cheer the Tibetan football team. For us, freedom comes in these small forms. I also want to take part in a nation-building process to elect Tibetan leaders in Tibet. And I think those same aspirations are true of Hong Kongers, of Uyghurs, and indeed of the people of China. The second short extract is from the very end of the book, and I think it conveys the central message. As Wu Kai-shi told me, quote, Congressman Chris Smith, who I know is a dear friend of Lord Alton's and of mine, Congressman Chris Smith said on the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre that, and this is interesting given Lord Alton's earlier remarks, in between the tank and the tank man, you have to choose one side. There is no middle way, there is no in-between. Today, with more than 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, a pandemic that hit the whole world, the dismantling of Hong Kong's freedoms, threats to Taiwan increasing, we need to end what the foreign policy establishment calls strategic ambiguity and introduce strategic clarity. That clarity is the answer to the question of what the free world should do. Stand clear and tell Beijing that there is a red line. The goal, as dissident Xu Zhiyong puts it in his powerful book, To Build a Free China, A Citizen's Journey, is, quote, a free China with democracy and the rule of law, a just and prosperous civil society, and a new national spirit of freedom, justice, and love. If we can help the peoples of China and Hong Kong, Tibet, and East Turkestan achieve that, the world will be a better, more peaceful, and safer place. Ladies and gentlemen, I conclude just by saying that we saw just over a week ago the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party regime on display in the consulate in Manchester, the appalling brutality, inhumanity, barbarity, and criminality of Xi Jinping's regime. And we saw it again just this weekend with the shocking removal of former President Hu Jintao from the party congress. Earlier today, I don't think anyone in the room kind of missed the fact a new Prime Minister in this country took office in Downing Street. I have written an open letter to Rishi Sunak today, which is available, I think, on paper at the back of the room and on the China Nexus website. And I set out what I hope he will do, 6 things in particular. And in the book, I set out in more detail other ideas for for what can be done. And so I just end by saying this. If you buy this book, and I echo Dean's hope, if you will, if you buy it, I'd urge you to please read it carefully. And if you read the book, please join with us in acting to help everyone suffering the repression of the Chinese Communist Party regime and to defend our own freedoms here at home and around the world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. That was terrific. And we'll now move, I think, straight away to the panel discussion. I'll try and keep us to time if I can. I'm delighted that on the panel that we have people I know and one I don't, but I know of, and I know that we'll be pleased to hear from each of them.
Assembly. We have a different number of countries. We have other countries that could potentially support it, but ultimately we cannot drop this topic. And this is also where Ben's book comes in picture. Ben's book is very, very important to shed light on the situation, to keep it on the agenda, because we know that the topics, especially of atrocity crimes, we get very tired of hearing those stories. Right now, of course, the topic of Uyghurs is slightly moving away from the agenda. We focus more on Ukraine, and unfortunately this happens to all atrocity crimes we've been working on in recent years. First on the Yazidis, then on the Rohingya, then of course on the situation in China, Tigray, somewhere in between as well. So unfortunately we need more attention. We need to shed light on those situations and keep them on the agenda until we see some kind of change. We see movement towards fighting this impunity. We see accountability and justice for all the victims and survivors.
Thank you, Rowena. Derek, let me turn to you, if I may, and ask you about something that Ben raised during his remarks, and that's about the link between what happened in Tibet and what has happened to Uyghur people. And from your own personal story, can you tell us something about things that you may have experienced? What do you know, or what have you seen on the ground? And after all, the man who is responsible in Xinjiang was responsible in Tibet for the same playbook for carrying out many of the same kinds of atrocities, crimes against humanity, and as some would say, a genocide. So tell us a bit about yourself, your experiences, and why we shouldn't lose sight of Tibet, however much we ought to be concerned about what's happening to Uyghurs, what's happening in Hong Kong, what's happening to the people of the 23 million people of Taiwan. So I think the mic is yours.
Actually, I already told my story to a couple of guys behind me. Okay, so there is a big link between things happening in Tibet, things happening in Uyghur. The guy who is the Communist Party chairman in Lhasa, who exactly did the same thing, humanitarian. So I think the guy who did exactly the same thing happened in Tibet. He did already concentration camps, re-education camps, but it's not large scale like happened in Uyghur. So I think this is the same guy who is responsible for things happening in Tibetan monasteries, monks and nuns in the re-education centers to reevaluate, force monks to sing Chinese national anthem, to believe Chinese